Hi, this is Stephen Wright. I'm the vendor certification analyst for Vendor Neutral. And we're here today with Mark Hunter, renowned sales expert, to talk about a few questions, maybe up to 4 questions to ask about the idea of what are 4 things to ask before acquiring any sort of sales text. So this will be not just an interview, but a discussion. So we'll see how it goes. Mark, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Mark Hunter. I'm known as the Sales Hunter. I've written a couple books, High Profit Selling, High Profit Prospecting. But hey, you know what? We're talking about that tech stack. So let's go ahead and jump into it, Stephen. Fire away. Let's get.
Great. So, I read a lot of things about all the questions you're supposed to ask and all of that, and everybody does a lot of content, and in a way, this is just a little bit more. But in my role, really looking closely at how a lot of sales tech solutions work, what they integrate with, what they promise to do, and how they need to do it, there's a few areas I've come across that I don't see asked as questions, and I'd be curious about what you think of some of those. One of the key areas that I think is very important for people to ask themselves is, how's their CRM implementation in terms of, is it complete? How long have they had it? How customized? How well adopted is it? Because without that level of integration with the CRM, a lot of these sales tech solutions lose some of their value. What do you think?
Oh, I think without a doubt. And that right there, I mean, if you look at the CRM, it's got to be the foundation. If you're not creating that as the foundation of your tech stack, you've got a real problem. And if you think about it, so many organizations are really only using 30, 40, 50% of their CRM capability. Excuse me, there may be 1 or 2 people that are using it to 80 or 90, but then there's another equal number of people that CRM. We have a CRM system? I didn't know that. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a $64 million question right there.
So, and I think I also noticed that a lot of companies, I'm curious about your opinion, where even if the CRM is being used, sellers often see it more as a stick than a carrot. They don't really see how it helps them.
Well, that's especially with the salespeople. Oh, yeah. I mean, the Salesforce says, "Oh, why'd you get this CRM system?" Oh, I see. So this is so you can spy on me. And see, I think this is one of the things that we need to do better as a sales community, and that is helping to really communicate, educate the Salesforce as to the value of what the CRM system can do for them.
Right. So kind of a related area, maybe not as widespread as a CRM, but is in terms of marketing automation. I mean, I think a lot of people really need, before they're looking at sales tech, particularly if it's very much about lead qualifying and perhaps inside sales and doing a lot of prospecting, is sort of saying, what's the state of your marketing? What kind of messaging you got? What kind of outbound marketing is happening and all of that? What are the number of targets you're expecting salespeople to deal with? What's the complexity of your solution and buying process in terms of how marketing is going to drive people to that? How do you score people? How do you qualify them? And how do you track it? And how does that relate to what your competition is doing in the space? Do you see a need for marketing to really think about how your marketing or your marketing automation is working as well?
Wow, Steve. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what, Stephen, you are reading a couple of chapters in my new book that isn't even coming out till spring of 2020. I mean, because I mean, seriously, this is so spot on. I love what you're talking about. It is. I mean, this is, there's so many things that you just described there. We could run with this for hours. In terms of automation and implementation and marketing and so forth. And let's kind of break these apart. First of all, too many times people think, well, gee, if we just install this little piece in our tech stack, the world will be at peace. We'll solve world hunger. That's not going to do anything at all unless you know how to do it. And I mean, I'm sure you see that a lot. People installing tech solutions, but no. The problem is themselves. The problem is their own culture. Right. The problem is their own organization, let alone adding in marketing into the mix. Because, this is the whole thing. Wow, boy, this is going to get ugly here, but I've really got to call this out. Too many times marketing is challenged with metrics that really are meaningless to sales. And yet somehow the two have got to dance. I'm sure you've heard this line, the only reason we have marketing is so sales has someone to blame. And then, the marketing people say the only reason we have sales is so we have someone to blame. And too many times the metrics don't line up. And when we add things into the tech stack, what happens is it winds up creating metrics that go even wonkier. Okay, I just made up a word. Wonkier. How's that? Soon to be followed by
wonkier.
Oh yeah, we're going from wonkier to wonkiest. Yeah.
Because I mean, that's one of the things I've really noticed with a lot of the sales technology is if it's being used relatively properly, it's gathering a huge amount of data. But what I've noticed on the part of a lot of practitioners is they really suck at using the data.
You are too nice. You are too nice. You're right.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And again, just because you have data, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, we can have all the data we want. But if the data can't be used for something meaningful, here's something I'll really argue. Just because it can be measured doesn't mean it should be measured.
I go back and forth on that. I say, on one hand, if it can't be measured, it can't be managed.
Right.
But yes, you're right. It's like, but what are you measuring, and does it need to be managed?
That's right. Bingo. I think we are. I tell you what you just said is gold. Because it is. I mean, if it can't be measured, it's not worth doing. Yeah, totally agree there. But just because we can measure it, I mean, man, I walk into sales organizations and I see them measuring things and I go, really? Does this really matter? You know, we're living in this race to AI, this race to big data. And it has us all believing that more data, is better. And I think it's very similar to the early days of CRM. Go back 15, 20 years, 10 years ago, really. And people were really getting excited about AI. I mean, about CRM systems. And as a result, what was happening? People were installing CRM systems, but they had no idea what they were doing. And I think that's a little bit of the same thing here.
I think it is. And especially a lot of times when you see AI, because it's going to take so much data, or it's going to profile seller's behavior or mine your CRM. And it's like, do you know how much data it takes to actually start getting any value out of that? Or how long it might take? I mean, it's like, yeah, it could, but it's not going to be flipping a switch and there are the answers.
Yeah.
But that sort of ties to the next area, and I'm curious in your thoughts of this, that before acquiring sales tech, I think a lot of companies need to take a hard look at what is their sales culture. What is it that they're trying to fix? Because sometimes automation and the tool and all of that just means you've found a new and interesting and potentially expensive way of doing something wrong a lot faster and at higher volume. So I think they need to take a strong look at their processes. They need to understand how, if they have a methodology, which is sort of a religious question, how does it play into what they're doing or not doing? How is their management culture? Because a lot of these sort of solutions are going to take a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years to really have their full value. And if you're not going to have a consistency in your management structure to sort of enforce that and keep driving that, I think it could be a challenge. What's the level of turnover? Because the more tools you got and the more turnover you've got, the longer it takes every salesperson to learn that. And how are you handling growth? And are these tools going to be able to grow with you? I'd be curious on your thoughts.
Well, yeah. Again, you just said a lot there, and I totally agree with you, because I see so many organizations, what they do is they bring in a piece, they drop it into their tech stack, and they think it's the Holy Grail. And then one person moves in a senior level position, and that piece is out of the tech stack, and something else gets dropped in. Right. And then you wonder why the sales force, the boots on the ground, or the inside salespeople, wherever this, the salespeople really making it happen, you wonder why they become jaded, because all they're seeing, all they're seeing is this is flavor of the month. Oh, if it's Tuesday, we must be doing this, and if it's Wednesday, we're doing this. But it comes back to the culture. See, here's the whole thing, and I think this is a real question that organizations have to ask themselves. First of all, am I bringing in this tool because it's cool? And this is where I give really props to so many organizations selling sales enablement tools because they've done a great job selling in a tool to solve a problem that the organization doesn't know they have. Now, here's where I think we have to be. As a sales organization, as a culture, I've got to understand, what are my needs? What are my challenges? What's my organization look like? And how best do I augment that? How best do I build that out to optimize that? And again, my fear, the worst case, and this is the role that I think vendor neutral plays so well, is helping guide organizations to be making the right decision. And this is so critical because I can buy, I saw this happen. I saw an organization. They were so desperate to find a solution that they were willing to pay any amount of money to bring in what they thought was going to be the solution. Well, the problem was the solution was senior management. The senior management had to change.
Yeah.
And that's, and again, wow. And you wonder why salespeople are skeptical. Wow. Gee, go figure.
Comes as no surprise. So I'm very curious about your answer to the last question for these 4 questions, because it's an area that I've had years of involvement in and all of that. But I think one of the questions that companies need to ask themselves is, do they have a sales enablement function, or what do they call that? Because it's like, who's going to be responsible for introducing some of these solutions? And sales enablement, I believe, goes far beyond just content management and training and development. They need to have some involvement and understanding on what's the whole tech stack, because after all, who's going to enable the sellers on how to use some of these tools and how do they fit into a bigger picture on all of that? If you have sales enablement, where does it report? Because I think if it's marketing, it's a whole different view on the part of sellers than if it reports to sales. And in looking across the entire tech stack, who's going to sort of stand in the middle to know who needs to learn about what and decide how it's working, and who's responsible for what pieces of the tech stack? I'm not saying that sales enablement has to be responsible for everything, but I think they need to have a good awareness and knowledge of it if you have a sales enablement function, to be able to maintain a coherent view of what it is that sellers are doing and how they're doing it and what they need to be enabled on. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they do need to have responsibility for everything. And I think sales enablement, if it's really being taken seriously, and there's 2 problems we have going on. There are people who are put into sales enablement, and all they're doing is trying to create little kingdoms. Right? That is totally wrong. 20 years ago, I was director of sales operations for a Fortune 500 company, and I reported directly into the VP of sales. In fact, I sat on the president's committee, and underneath me was all of sales enablement. We didn't call it sales enablement. We called it sales operations, but my team was responsible for everything, from the computers to the CRM to the messaging system, all those tools that we had 20 years ago, back in the archaic dark days, pre-internet. But we were handling all that. And I think where companies make a mistake is when they allow the tech stack to be controlled by IT. They allow it to be controlled by this group. Now, I had input in the best organizations I see today. Sales enablement will have input from IT. In fact, for a long time, I had an IT person sitting on my staff, which was great. He was on loan from IT, and that worked very, very well. But everything we did was immediately aligned with what our business plan was, what our sales numbers were, what were our sales objectives for that particular fiscal year. And when we would sit down and do out-year planning and put together a 3-year strategic plan, I was part of that to be, okay, where do we have to be from a technology standpoint? It has to be integrated in. I see too many organizations taking sales enablement and making it part of training. And that drives me. Yeah, they got to be trained on it. But boy, that's just undermining the long-term value of what that tech stack can do for an organization.
Very good. Thank you. Well, that's the 4 questions we were planning to cover. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. And so as Stephen Wright from Vendor Neutral, I'd like to thank Mark Hunter for joining us today. And we're going to be talking more. So come find out more when you can. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Great selling.